podcast, The Rhythm. Go live, Vegas on the screen, feeling the flow, so pristine. Boom, as the beats align, electric dreams, they intertwine.
We just need to forget about everything. Put away our problems. Get along with each other.
All right, everybody, welcome on into the Go Live Vegas studio. We are off and running on a Monday, and as big as it gets in this line of work of any Monday, student of the game here on all of our digital platforms, social media channels as well. And in fact, later in the show, we're going to have a bit of an update of an additional way that you could tune in. Again, we're very excited about where things are headed for us as a network in 2026, and we want you to be involved with it. But, of course, like I just said, it's as big as it gets in this world of sports media as the dust settles in the immediate aftermath of the Super Bowl. The Monday after the Super Bowl is always as big as it gets, regardless of what happens in the game. Now, of course, every time you approach the game itself, you want for a barn burner classic. In our minds, we always try to map that out, and we get our hopes up as if it has a possibility of happening. And then when it doesn't, we get disappointed. And if it does, we're obviously, elated. Naturally so. But handicapping this game and analyzing it and prognosticating it any way you could, shape, or form, you knew deep down as this game went on, it began to play out more and more like we thought it would all along. At least the collective. I don't mean to speak for everybody. And yes, there were some Patriot fans out there who held on to some hope. There may have been some people out there who weren't truly sold on the Seahawks from top to bottom. I myself thought the line was too small. I thought it should have been a little bit bigger. But ultimately, this was one team playing a team that they were downright better than from top to finish. We knew that to be the case before the game kicked off in Santa Clara on Sunday. And now again, as the dust settles and as that 29-13 outcome, that final is set in stone, we now realize that exactly what we felt might happen was the right gut feeling all along. And it is not necessarily a reflection of New England being fraudulent or New England not being good enough. It's more so a reflection of Seattle being built for this very moment. We have seen now the past couple of years some teams, and it's through various ways, multiple different styles, multiple different paths of getting there. We have seen teams perfectly constructed, right? We have seen architects at the helm of these ball clubs lead the way and build not just a contender, but build the perfect kind of team in a really quick amount of time. And John Schneider now for Seattle has done exactly that. And he has done that 2 times over. Now, we know what this team was in the mid-teens, or the mid-2010s rather, and we know how that all ended, how everything dissipated, and ultimately how it really seemed to culminate quickly with the window slamming shut on everything those Seattle teams were able to do, and it took them a while to get back. But when you look at how quickly they were able to turn it around from having no identity, assembling this defense through a combination of both the draft and the free agent market, bringing in Big Cat Leonard Williams, bringing in DeMarcus Lawrence, drafting Byron Murphy. Now you have a formidable pass rush. You slowly build up that secondary and linebacking core with the Emanwaris and with the Ernest Jones and with the Devin Witherspoons and company and so on and so forth. And next thing you know, you have an elite unit in all 3 phases that is very reminiscent of what you had all those years ago when you first truly burst onto the scene, at least during this John Schneider regime. He has now done this twice over with 2 completely different looking teams, is the first one to do it completely outright with a different team to where nobody left over from that 2013 squad that annihilated Denver 12 years ago is still on this roster. They're long gone. And again, that very much dissipated in the immediate aftermath of the Russell Wilson contract, because once they extended him, that team slowly began to become diminished. The roster was dwindled down, and it dwindled down quick. Next thing you know, those key defensive players, right? The Legion of Boom, they're out of town. Marshawn Lynch is no longer a factor, and it's Russell Wilson's team. It worked initially in those in those last few years with Pete Carroll. But again, Geno Smith isn't amazing, decent stopgap, but isn't the guy that you envision yourself with in the future as you build this defense and these offensive weapons around him. So what do? You go into the market, and for the perfect example of finding the right player rather than the best one, you go to Sam Darnold, who was clearly disregarded and not wanted by the Vikings, given what he did last year. And the way that season ended in the playoffs, it was clear they were going to go with J.J. McCarthy, and Sam Darnold was going to have to find another place to play quarterback. Seattle was there. They knew Geno wasn't the guy. They knew Darnold could be the guy. And here we are with their second ever Lombardi Trophy, all as a result of not just great execution in the front office, but timing. You slowly, gradually build, or at least what seems like a slow, gradual build, but next thing you know, it's 2-3 years. You have one of the best rosters in the league simply by knowing what draft picks you want, going after them right away, and also addressing the holes in the market come March. All they needed moving forward was the right quarterback, and they found him. And we saw what happened all year long. Jackson Smith-Njigba, Offensive Player of the Year. Cooper Kupp very much revitalized his career, at least the back end of it, and the trajectory where that was headed, because everyone thought, at least the Rams thought, he was done in L.A. Everything came together at the right time. It culminated at the right time for Seattle to create this perfect storm, much like it did for Philly a year ago under Howie Roseman, and much like it has in a couple of different instances. We've seen it with the Chiefs and Brett Veach. We'll see if they can recalibrate. But we've also seen it with the Rams and Les Snead, and they've gotten back with multiple different teams. Notice the pattern here. Philadelphia, Kansas City, the Rams, even Seattle, despite it being a much longer gap than those other teams, they get back because they know how to go back to the drawing board. And for a while, we thought maybe Seattle found their guy post-Russell Wilson. But the immediate moment that became clear where that wasn't the case, and where it became known where Geno Smith wasn't going to be the guy, that is where the ball really went in motion. And sure, throughout the various, ebbs and flows of the regular season, there were times where the offense didn't look great. The running game wasn't always present, but we saw what happened down the stretch for the Seattle Seahawks team. They begin running the ball, finding an element of balance. Charbonnet and Walker are both great. What happens? Charbonnet goes down, so then Walker has to step up, and we saw him play superbly on Super Bowl Sunday on that field. Everybody who needed to step up throughout the course of the year, bringing in Rashid Shaheed at the trade deadline, all of these moving parts that didn't seem as big in the immediate moment because maybe we were enamored with, the more public teams, whether they're that good or not, but they have a superstar on them, right? We're enamored with Baltimore because of Lamar Jackson. We're enamored with the Rams because of Matthew Stafford, and Buffalo because of Josh Allen, Kansas City because of Patrick Mahomes, even Cincinnati because of Joe Burrow, the Philadelphia Eagles because of what they were able to do last year with a historic year from Saquon Barkley, and the fact that it was very much a letdown year for them this year. Kyle Shanahan and the Niners overachieving with just an absolute onslaught of injuries, right? All these things seem to kind of simultaneously distract us from what Seattle was doing. And by the time we realized what Seattle really had cooking, we knew they were the team. Kyle Shanahan said in the pregame show yesterday as a guest analyst on NBC, 2 times he played them, he had no answer for them. Kyle Shanahan is yielding to the fact he had nothing for Seattle. Now, sure, in that trilogy against the Rams, we saw Stafford move the ball against them. We saw a true clash of styles there that made for a great matchup, so much so where in hindsight you wish that could have been the Super Bowl to a degree because it would have been a more competitive matchup. And the Rams are the only team that really proved they could consistently move the ball against this defense, right, against this dark side defense. But ultimately, we saw the Rams in that the Seahawks in that Week 16 game against the Rams dig down deep when they needed to. And ever since that clutch win when they won off that freakish, almost flukish 2-point conversion, they have been unstoppable. Easily take care of Carolina. Easily take care of San Francisco in the season finale. You get that first-round bye as a result of that. Had they not beaten the Rams, it wouldn't have been that way because the trajectory, the road to the Super Bowl would have been much different. They secured 2 home playoff games and a first-round bye by winning that game and handling the Niners in this regular season finale. 2 weeks later, they handed the Niners their lunch once again, and now they're playing the Rams in that trilogy matchup, which was such a great NFC Championship game. Last time I was in the studio breaking it all down for you guys, Kill and I even discussed it ourselves, that it just felt like no matter who won that game, ultimately they were going to wind up winning the Lombardi Trophy simply because you knew the AFC didn't have the right type of matchup and opposition. Styles make fights, and we'll get to New England in a second here, but styles make fights. And the Rams and the Seahawks, they stood out all year long because of their ability to play multiple brands of football. But when it was all said and done, it was the balance of offense, defense, and special teams that really made the difference, because that was an element that the Rams, as we saw, did not have. As good as Matt Stafford and Sean McVay and Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams may be, we thought the Rams were the team because on paper it does make sense that they would be. But Seattle had the right squad. It was theirs for the taking because, again, of how they're structured. It was a tactical approach, and I've said it multiple times on this show and plenty others, that it sometimes isn't always about having the best players, which they still have plenty of. They have elite defensive linemen, elite corners, elite safeties and linebackers, and obviously the best receiver in the game. Kenneth Walker has turned out to be a pretty damn good running back in his own right. But it's not about necessarily them being so stacked. It's about them having so few weaknesses. And we saw that be the case all postseason long. This was the team. They didn't turn the ball over once. Darnold did exactly what he needed to. He stepped up when you needed him to. He backed off when you needed him to because it was going to be more of a Kenneth Walker type of approach. He managed the game. He also made plays. Everything you needed to do as an offense in terms of check boxes, you did. And the rest was to just let that defense have a field day. And again, with the exception of the Rams and Stafford and those weapons, nobody was able to get anything going against this stacked defensive unit that is built in every direction to do exactly what they just did. And look, the game itself, it was a little bit closer than we may have anticipated early on. New England's defense did overachieve, but that was the story of New England the entire postseason. New England's defense had to carry them against the Chargers. It had to carry them against the Texans. It had to carry them against the Broncos. And all respect to Drake May, I rightfully believe that the MVP race should have been as close as it was. But those voters, even if it's a regular season award, those voters are looking ultimately at the type of player who can provide the best performance against the best competition. We did not necessarily see throughout the year New England face the best competition. We saw teams like the Seahawks and the Rams face a much greater uptick in level of opponent or overall caliber of opponent. And that's why I think a big reason why, even though statistically they were marginal, Stafford won the MVP and May didn't, even if May's shortcomings didn't happen until after the conclusion of the regular season, in which the award represents anyway. So it's not to diminish in hindsight what Drake May has done. More so, I think the writing was on the wall for that. Eventually, this New England team was not going to be able to play this brand of football any longer, especially against the winner of the NFC. It may have been good enough to get the job done against a Chargers team with a depleted offensive line who couldn't protect Herbert. It may have been good enough against a C.J. Stroud who turns the ball over left and right and has one of his worst games as a pro. It may have been good enough against Jared Stidham, a backup, who basically last minute is kind of thrust in there. And even then, that was a competitive game in Denver against the Elements that really, if had Bo Nix been there, you have to wonder if New England is even advancing to the Super Bowl to begin with. So it's not a hindsight 2020 type of thing. No, New England punched their ticket, but eventually that style, that brand of play was not going to work against a team like Seattle, and we saw that ring to be true. Christian Gonzalez was incredible. If it weren't for him, who knows what that halftime score would have been going into the locker room. That New England secondary, they played their asses off to keep that thing close. And a huge shout out to Mike Vrabel and company for having a good game plan to follow Jackson Smith-Njigba, to not let the downfield passing attack hurt them, to make Darnold hold on the ball as long as possible, right? But even so, once you got Kenneth Walker going, and once one possession for New England was met null and void, then another New England possession was met null and void. With each passing increment of time, with each passing series, that Patriots defense got more and more worn out, and it was unfair to expect them to be able to hold up any longer without any type of support from Drake May and the offense. Ultimately, the chickens had to come home to roost, and New England was just not able to play a sustainable style of ball that would allow them to capture the Lombardi Trophy once again. It in no way diminishes what they've done. The turnaround is legit. Vrabel deserves Coach of the Year. Again, I think the MVP race should have been as close as it was, even though I myself had Stafford winning it. I think they made the right call there. But when you lose 13 games one year and then bounce back and win 14 a year later, I don't care how weak your caliber of opponent is or your strength of schedule. No, you are there for a reason, and that is because you overachieved. You may have ran out of gas at the end and met a brick wall in the form of Seattle, but we cannot automatically just say New England was fraudulent, because if they were, they would have faltered at some point in the playoffs. I think, if anything, it was just more of an anomaly, because rarely do we see an offense that struggles that much in pass protection and being able to move the ball advance 3 straight weeks through the playoffs and book their ticket to the Super Bowl. You think Houston or Denver eventually would have been the final straw, and yet New England was able to survive, and they deserve a lot of credit for it. But I'm not going to sit here on Monday and act like, oh, they were never that good to begin with, when the last time I was on this very show, and as so many others prognosticated and predicted going in, this game played out like it was supposed to, especially once the pass rush took over and Drake May got rattled. We saw him get rattled all postseason long. He was sacked 21 times in the playoffs. That was telling in terms of what Seattle was going to be able to do. Will Campbell, I like the kid. I think he could be a good player, likely going to be kicked in offensive guard. Plus, he was hurt this year anyway. And when you have those type of matchups with the Chargers, with the Broncos, with the Texans, and now with the Hawks, you have elite pass rushers left and right against an offensive line that is not quite there yet. And I think that is ultimately the message of New England, very much the antithesis of Seattle, who has arrived in full force and are already sitting right there with the Rams as the favorites, essentially co-favorites, depending on where you look, to repeat next year. They're going to be right there in the mix. And again, it's because John Schneider had a perfect, tactful plan, and they executed it flawlessly. And Sunday was just another showcase of it. So I think two things can be true. I think we could tip our caps to New England for even getting there, even if it may have not been the most entertaining road. And I also think we have to tip our caps to Seattle regarding just how well they played, not on Sunday, but the entire postseason. And as we saw that season heat up more and more, yes, some doubts crept in. Would Darnold be able to keep it up? Would Darnold be able to seize the moment that his teammates and his coaches, Clint Kubiak, were setting up for him? Mike McDonald at the helm of it all, a defensive-minded guy who doesn't get overly involved, right, with the offense. Everything was laid out for Seattle to succeed, but it was also laid out for them to falter as a result of Darnold turning into the Darnold of old, and he did not do that. And that ultimately, while in the immediate aftermath of it all, yes, it's so easy to say, oh, but the game was boring. It didn't really deliver. The commercials this, the halftime show that, whatever. We've gotten so spoiled into thinking every Super Bowl should be this barn-burning classic. We forget that for years it was not. In fact, the competitive Super Bowl, quote-unquote, is something that has kind of emerged in the recent era of football. And to think that every time we're going to get one, that's asinine. But how about it that the two that we have seen end with a Seattle Seahawks victory were blowouts? And that's because in both of those instances, Seattle was drastically a better team to the eye, to the numbers, on paper, on the field, whatever the metric may be. They were much better than Denver was all those years ago, just like they were that much better than New England. And speaking of New England, how about the revenge angle? Because if they give the ball to Marshawn Lynch or at least concoct a better play than a goal line slant 11 years ago, this may be Seattle's third title. So again, it just goes to show everything is cyclical in football. It took a while for Seattle to get back, but we saw how brilliant they were in architecting everything all those years ago, and now the process has repeated itself in a completely different fashion with completely different narratives attached, but ultimately the same result. And through it all, if there's one thing we want in the wake of a Super Bowl, it's a human interest story, or at least some type of feel-good story that we can look back on and say, that's what I'll remember that Super Bowl for. Well, if it's not about how brilliantly of a roster construction, how brilliantly this roster is constructed for Seattle, if that's not your main takeaway, then Sam Darnold has to be. Because that is as good of a quarterback redemption story as you will ever find in the National Football League. And yeah, there are two sides to the story. On the other side of the coin, you could look at Drake May and wonder, will they be able to get back? Will the AFC kind of return to form? Will Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen be back with a vengeance? Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars. The Chargers are projected to be really good next year, right? Like, you don't know exactly when you are going to get back, especially if you were a team that overachieved. But with that being said, New England seems like they're still a ways away, and it's tough to look for a silver lining after you just got whooped pretty good in the Super Bowl. But if there is one for New England, it would be that the best could potentially still be yet to come with an offensive line that's a little more shored up and with some additional weapons that May can work with. I don't think this is about New England now and with it all being said and done. I think this is more about the statement of Seattle being who they are, because I think most teams in the AFC would have ran against the Seahawks, and it would have been the same buzzsaw type of result as we saw yesterday. And that's why you have to think, if only we could have gotten Rams-Seahawks Part 4, right, in the Super Bowl. Obviously, that's impossible. But at the same time, it just goes to show that there are certain teams that are really built to compete right now, and they're doing it with a modernized style. And quite frankly, Seahawks are one of those teams in full form. And I think if we didn't accept it now there's no denial, there's no doubting it. The league very much goes through Seattle. Maybe not solely through Seattle, but this will continue to be the case. This isn't just some one-off, bring all the pieces we can together to get there, and then it all dissolves quickly after. There is a foundation here, and through it all, we were all maybe not pleasantly reminded. Again, it depends on what side of the fence you're on, but we were utterly reminded that defense, in fact, does still win championships. It may not be the norm, but it can still happen. And how fitting is that Mike Macdonald and this defensive unit is the nucleus of it all. Again, the narrative will be Darnold, as it should be, because, man, what a story that is. But ultimately, the crux of it all goes back to what they were building before he got there. They were the cake. Darnold was the icing. But when it's all said and done, if your biggest takeaway is Sam Darnold, that is completely fine too. Because if Geno Smith is still there, I don't think they're here. And if Sam Darnold is just kind of thrust to Seattle without any foundation, I don't think he redeems himself in the same way he has this season. It was a cumulative, not just cumulative effort, a cumulative operation for all parties involved. And ultimately, when it's all said and done, the Seattle Seahawks walk away as champions of professional football, and they did it in master class fashion. All right, we're going to go ahead and go to a quick break really quick, though. Again, still plenty to come on the show. We have stuff to wrap up on all fronts, so don't go anywhere. We'll be back on the other side. But then, all right. Scratch that. We're gonna go another 5 minutes really quick here. That was a miscommunication. But ultimately, as we hang our hat, as we wrap it up, these ultimate final 5 minutes, though, that should be the takeaway, though. Darnold is the feel-good story. Darnold is ultimately what we will remember when we look back on it, but he may not be the entire story, and that's okay, because that is the Seahawks in microcosm. They didn't need him to be, and now, since everyone played their part, he is going to be the guy you think of when you look back on this game. And in a world of narratives, whether we like it or not, that's what we're going to remember. And it's pretty awesome. The first quarterback from USC to start a Super Bowl, the first quarterback from USC to now win a Super Bowl, and how fitting it is that all the teams that he's been on combined, when you look at the Jets, when you look at the Panthers, when you look at the Niners, when you look at the Vikings, through it all, 32 years is the total amount of time since either of those teams, or any of those teams rather, last hoisted the Lombardi Trophy. 2 years ago, he was playing in a Super Bowl in this very city in Las Vegas as a backup. It's funny how things can change, and if there's one thing we definitely want to look back on and remember regarding not just Sam Darnold, but how we view quarterbacks in the year 2025, moving to 2026, maybe this is the line in the Sam moment where we realize we shouldn't be so quick to label these guys busts. Some guys take longer to develop. Sometimes a change of scenery, multiple changes of scenery is what you need. And when it's all said and done, it's not necessarily about finding the best case scenario in the immediate sense, but in the eventual sense, if you have the talent to stick around. He always had the talent to stick around, and now it comes to fruition, and he gets to call himself a world champion. And I mean, Kenneth Walker, I think he had to get the MVP, so I don't think he necessarily needed the MVP to validate it. He just needed the right outcome and the right type of performance. He didn't have to do too much. He was still able to get a passing touchdown there to Barner, his tight end. And when it's all said and done, even if the stat line doesn't blow you away, the results do. Shout out to Sam Darnold. Maybe, again, next time we don't label the early round quarterback who's in a disastrous situation, multiple disastrous situations, a bust until we see what he can do in the proper situation. Safe to say the Seattle Seahawks are a proper situation. So, again, that's all I wanted to get on it. I know that was a little disjointed there at the end. Just a quick show today, just give my final thoughts on the game. Obviously, we start to turn the page now into 2026, and there's going to be so much to unpack there, from the draft to the coaching vacancies that have been filled. How are these new teams going to look with their new coaches? Who gets brought in the free agency market? How do Seattle and the Rams and the Eagles and other teams who are so stacked on paper, how do they look in the NFC? Who gets back into the mix in the AFC? Do you have teams like the Eagles and the Chiefs getting back to the forefront? Or are we now turning the page and transitioning into a new period of time with a new level of parity? One thing I will say, when you look at how the Seattle Seahawks built their team in terms of the championship, and when you look at how the Indiana Hoosiers in the college football world effectively built a championship, we now learned in 2025 that there is more than one way on both fronts to get yourself a title, and I think that is the greatest lesson of all. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not cookie-cutter. There are various ways to do it, and we saw teams this year do exactly that. So don't worry, there'll still be plenty of football talk to come, but we'll obviously turn the page. We have plenty of basketball. You have Winter Olympics, hockey, baseball talk's going to get really interesting, so make sure to check it all out here on Student the Game as we keep track of all of it. Rest assured, there'll be probably some football talk next week as well. I can't contain myself, especially that the news cycle never ends on that front. But the 2025 season in the books, the Seahawks are world champions, and we were happy to break it down for you right here from the Go Live Vegas studio. Thank you for tuning in on all of our social media and digital platforms, and one of those platforms coming your way soon, ain't here yet, but it will be soon, a brand new mobile app that will be available on all devices, where initially we will put it out there for Android and iPhone users. Any way you could get the show across the board, through social media, through the website, through YouTube, you could get on that app as well. We will give you more details and more information as we get closer, but keep that in mind, because again, as we push forward in 2026, we expect a lot of exciting things. Again, the ball's moving, the wheels are turning. We expect a lot of exciting happenings here in the Go Live Vegas family, and we want you to be a part of it. So be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us so you can do exactly that. Take care, and we'll catch you next time right here on Student of the Game.
Maybe we should all just put away our problems. We just need to forget about everything